If you ask me, Possum Springs is one of the best drawn towns or hub areas in all of video games. I think it's right up there with Silent Hill, the Normandy from Mass Effect, or Firelink Shrine from Dark Souls. Not only does it have its own unique culture and traditions, something we'll be diving into here on this channel quite a bit at the end of this month, but it's full of side stories that give its streets depth and life. For example, have you ever noticed that this raccoon here is pregnant at the beginning of the game, and by the epilogue has welcomed a new baby? And have you ever sat and watched the entire conversation in front of the Telesoft building on day one? It's pretty interesting, especially when you consider how it aligns with many of the game's core themes. There's always something to do, or something to see in Possum Springs. Just as important to our understanding of this Rust Belt town are the minor characters who help to, well, characterize it. So in this video, the penultimate chapter of my Night in the Woods character analysis series, let's take a look at 3 of the faces of Possum Springs: Steve Scriggans, Jackie, and Danny. But before I go on, if you are a Night in the Woods fan, then please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me with a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. My dream is to make these videos full-time someday, and by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. Now, let's start with Steve Scriggans. Steve Scriggans is the worst. He's every idiot, asshole, and douchebag you went to high school with rolled into one. He tells stupid jokes, refers to both May and Greg as, quote, ladies, gets into all kinds of unscrupulous behavior, and is just an altogether unlikable person. May wants nothing to do with him, which, honestly, says a lot. May is generally accepting of most people, and she's always down to do crimes, so the fact that she despises Steve speaks volumes about the type of person he is. Looking into his backstory, it's no surprise that she feels this way. He once locked a teacher in a supply closet, and they were trapped in there throughout Longest Night Break. Longest Night Break is equivalent to winter break here in the States, which generally lasts anywhere from a week to 2 weeks depending on when Christmas falls. So this poor educator was in there for a long time, and considering that you can only make it for 3 days without water, I suspect that they probably had to do some pretty desperate things to survive. There's just nothing funny about this. The majority of May's delinquent behavior is juvenile stuff, like petty thievery, stealing pretzels for a good cause, knife fighting, or breaking light fixtures that no one is going to miss. All very minor stuff in the grand scheme of things. But what Steve did to that teacher is just cruel. Do crimes, not cruels, my friends. We all knew people like this in high school. People who just like to watch the world burn. Some folks grow out of behavior like this, but a lot of people don't. Steve Scriggans clearly didn't. And despite the fact that May herself hasn't grown that much, it's the nature of the things that he hasn't grown out of that makes her feel so repulsed by him. And according to the wiki, in cut content, Lori M mentions that Steve Scriggans still goes to high school parties and hits on high school girls. While there are obviously issues with relying on cut content for answers, I have to say, that tracks. That is 100% exactly the type of person I expected Steve Scriggans to be. In this sense, Steve Scriggans is really a classic high school archetype. The cruel, creepy, slightly older student who never grew out of their unsavory behavior and continues to engage in it even though they're in their 20s. If you're out of high school yourself, then I'm sure you know exactly the type of person I'm talking about. I'll never forget going to a few bars with my wife on Thanksgiving Eve back when we first started dating, running into some Steve Scriggans type dudes, and realizing that even after all these years, they hadn't changed one bit. Given Steve's general attitude, the way he looks down on others, and the fact that he hasn't grown at all since high school, I've always felt that if the cult survived the end of the game, he would have ended up becoming a member. He doesn't have much in common with the current cult members, but he's definitely the type of guy who ends up becoming a right-wing knucklehead after spending most of his life as an aimless knucklehead. At least, That's my reading of him. You're welcome to disagree. Now, let's shift gears entirely and move from a character who's a deliberate asshole to one who's out to bring some good into the world, even if she tends to be a bit abrasive when doing so. Jackie, also known as Jackie the anti-fascist goat, is one of Bee's close friends. She hosts the parties that Bee goes to, the ones in the city that give her a taste of what it's like to be in college, if only for a night. As revealed by Scott Benson in some developer commentary and clarified by some comments that were added to the Weird Autumn edition, Jackie is a trans woman, which is pretty cool. As I've said elsewhere, Night in the Woods does a stellar job with representation, and Jackie's identity only strengthens this. And as is implied by her name, her politics are clear. She's an anti-fascist, which means that she's someone who proudly makes a point of fighting back against fascism. It's one of the many prescient aspects of the game's political commentary. I've brought this up a few times at this point, but although Night in the Woods was released in February 2017, months after Trump won the 2016 election, the writing was, obviously, completed far earlier, meaning that the developers had a pretty good sense of where things were going way back in 2014 or 2015. I find this to be particularly impressive as far as Jackie is concerned, because hardly anyone was talking about anti-fascists back then. Groups like Antifa made a name for themselves in the aftermath of the 2016 election, but I think if you asked most people what an anti-fascist was at any point prior, they probably would have guessed it was a new variety of punk rock music. So major credit to Scott Benson and company for, once again, adding some prescient politics to their game. But regardless of her politics, Jackie can be a rather abrasive person. We see this at the party in the woods, when May very quickly gets drunk. She's dismissive of her, and wants nothing to do with her even before she goes on her unhinged rant on the tree stump. The implication here is that Jackie didn't like May in high school, and still doesn't to this day. Later, after May embarrasses Bee at her college party, Jackie really lays into May. It's not entirely uncalled for. She did screw up big time and really hurt Bee, but I don't think she deserves all this. If you ask me, Jackie takes it too far here. May's earned some flack. She misses some big social cues at the party, but it's not like she was malicious about it. She messed up. She didn't set out to ruin Bee's night. And in the brief time we get to spend with Jackie, that's a pretty accurate summation of her character. She's the type of person who has the best of intentions in her passionate defenses of Bee, but in her zeal to protect her friend, gets a bit carried away. Finally, let's talk about Danny. Danny is a character we meet on day 1, smoking a cigarette towards the end of Maple Street. I don't think it's ever explicitly stated, but this is probably his house, where he lives with his parents. During his conversation with May, he reveals that he just lost his job. And over the next 2 in-game weeks, this happens several more times. He says he has a zombie resume thanks to all the jobs he's been let go from. He spent some time working at the old pickaxe for Bee, but gets fired for unknown reasons. Then he takes up a job at the Click Clack Diner as both a chef and a janitor, which is a questionable division of labor, to say the least. I mean, the guy who flips my hamburgers definitely shouldn't be the same guy who's cleaning the toilets. That just is very unsanitary. But regardless, by the end of the game, Danny is once again in a new position, as a taco artisan at Taco Buck, the Chipotle-style restaurant that replaces the much-beloved Pastabilities. When I examine Danny's role in Night in the Woods, I'd argue that he, primarily, serves to drive home the game's core economic themes and contribute to the world building. As sad as it is to say, Danny's story is not all that unusual for many folks in Rust Belt communities like Possum Springs. It happens at a quicker pace for dramatic effect, but there are plenty of people out there who, just like Danny, are struggling to find work, and even when they do, can't seem to hold down a job. If you're not in this type of position yourself, or live in an area where people are generally better off, you might not know this. But by placing Danny throughout the game, and in situations where he's always down on his luck, the developers are shedding light on this unfortunate reality. At the same time, Danny's story is somewhat of a parallel to May's. At the start of the game, he's deep in a hole and continues to have his ups and downs. A new job here, fired again there, until the epilogue, where it seems like there might be some hope for stability for him at Taco Buck. Taco Artisan is a pretty sweet title, and though this might be wishful thinking, the fact that he has such a moniker at all implies to me that he's a bit more respected here than he was with his previous employers. And of course, the same is true for May. She starts out at rock bottom, has good days and bad days, but as the first November snows fall on Possum Springs, it seems like things might be turning around for her, just as they are for down on his luck Danny. So in Steve Scriggans, Jackie, and Danny, we have three very different characters who in their own small way add depth, color, and life to the town of Possum Springs. And that's what makes them so important to Night in the Woods. Thanks for watching. Huge thanks to Wolf.Godwin and Jordi Jaen Moreno for providing the music for these videos and the art for my channel. Big shout out to all my silver and gold tier YouTube channel members and Patreon subscribers, including James Pruitt, Corey Matson, Gustavo Balabi, Lil Caesar, Reed, Pathonian, and Faith G, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 to $10 a month. See you guys next time!